I knew today was going to be a hard day. It's okay. You guys know me. The Lord has blessed me with many emotions and big emotions, and it's okay. That's how I'm created. I am so overjoyed. Today we are doing our Disability Ministry Sunday. We have our friends from Johnny and Friends here to partner with us. Our passage today, we're going to take a cue from Johnny and Friends' mission statement, is book of Luke, chapter 14, verses 15 to 24. We are taking a break from our series in Joshua. I know some of you are very sad about that because you're such good Bible scholars. Don't worry, we'll pick that up again next week. But we would not pause if it were not for very good cause. So we're going to look at this story, this parable that Jesus tells in Luke chapter 14, verses 15 to 24. Let's read it, and then it's going to be a little bit different today. It's going to be largely testimony today, but of course we are anchored in the Word of God in all that we do. Starting in verse 15, when one of those who reclined at the table with him heard these things, he said to him, "Blessed is everyone who will eat bread in the kingdom of God." But he said to him, "A man once gave a great banquet and invited many, and at the time for the banquet he sent his servant to say to those who had been invited, 'Come, for everything is now ready.' But they all alike began to make excuses. The first said to him, 'I have bought a field, and I must go out and see it. Please have me excused.' Another said, 'I have bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I go to examine them. Please have me excused.' And another said, 'I have married a wife, and therefore I cannot come.' So the servant came and reported these things to his master. Then the master of the house became angry and said to his servant, 'Go out quickly to the streets and lanes of the city, and bring in the poor, and crippled, and blind, and lame.' And the servant said, 'Sir, what you have commanded has been done, and still there is room.' And the master said to the servant, 'Go out to the highways and hedges and compel people to come in, that my house may be filled. For I tell you, none of those men who were invited shall taste my banquet.'" So again, we're having our Disability Ministry Spotlight Sunday today. This is not just a one-time thing, as Pastor Jason said. This is a catalyst, something that we will always be about, we have been about, and we will continue to be about. We're taking our cue from Joni and Friends here, and you saw the video from Joni herself. A healthy, active 17-year-old, right? And in an instant, her life changed. By the way, how graced are we to be born able-bodied? How graced are you to be born of sound mind, right? It's a grace. She was left quadriplegic at 17 years old, her whole life ahead of her. And she struggled with a deep depression and anger, as you can imagine, but reemerged from that with a hope that only comes from divinity. And she has done countless work for the kingdom of God. She's an author. She's an artist. You can buy her artwork. It's amazing. My husband, they have a booth out there, and he did some shopping already this morning. He bought one of her devotionals there. She is just doing so much good work for the kingdom and for people with special needs and disabilities. So like I said, today is going to be different. I'm going to share some of our story. There's no way to cover all of it. There's so much. I could talk about it forever. If you ever want to ask me questions, I'm always happy to talk to you. But the reason that I'm so happy we're doing this on Sunday morning, because anytime I go to a resource for special needs or for parents or caregivers or whatever, it's always people who are already in that world who are there. And my biggest regret when I go to these things is that, really, it's the rest of the world. It's the people who don't know, who really need to hear this. And so I am so grateful for our church leadership to be doing this right now. And this is what we are about. Thank you so much for giving this platform to this cause. And it's not just, something that we're doing as a church. When we do this, we are obeying mandate that comes from God. When we look at life of Jesus himself, did you know that 75% of Jesus' miracles were performed upon the disabled community? Jesus saw them. He was El Roy. He saw them. And as disciples of Jesus, it is our responsibility to steward this as well. So a couple of groundworks for what I'm going to be sharing today. I'm going to be using the terms disability and special needs interchangeably, okay? I know even around that word, there's some feelings, there's some controversy. I'm not disabled, I'm just differently abled. Some people like the word disabled because it points to, hey, I am legitimately not able to do some things that you are. And so they receive services that they should, that they ought to. Also, when I talk about the special needs or the disabled community, I'm not just talking about the individual, I'm talking about the families. I'm talking about parents. I'm talking about community. I'm talking about siblings, caregivers, because that is the community. And then my last kind of disclaimer is that much of my experience, of course, is around autism, because my son is diagnosed with autism. That's what I know. But this world of disabilities and special needs, it extends far beyond just that. There are all sorts of disabilities and special needs. We have physical handicaps. We have mental and emotional needs, social emotional needs. There's just so many, and it encompasses all of that. As you know, this is a deeply, deeply personal work for me. Our son has a diagnosis of autism and a lesser diagnosis of speech and language impairment. The day that we received our diagnosis changed our lives. We had 3 children. He's our middle child, so Jedediah is our oldest, Matthias, and then Abigail was a newborn when we were going through all this. So it was just a really hard life stage already, having 2 toddlers and a newborn. And if juggling that was not hard enough, we get this diagnosis. He just, it's hard at that age. Everyone develops a little bit differently. I don't know if he's just a late bloomer or, he's on his own pace, and he just wasn't talking quite as much as he should be. He didn't really play with the other kids, kind of did his own thing, and sometimes he seemed completely unbothered by things, and other times he would just have a meltdown over a drop of water getting on his clothes or something, and we just couldn't figure it out. He would never, ever stay still. From the moment he could move his body, he was never, ever still. He was always climbing on something or under something or through something or to something. It was exhausting. He was an escape artist. He would do things that were just unsafe because, as we will later know, part of his autistic brain is he had no sense of danger. And he would just walk out and keep walking out on the street if you let him. And when a kid doesn't talk and he has no sense of danger, it's a very scary place to be as a parent. One day, we had just moved into a new house, and PG&E was there to do some work, and so they left the side gate open to walk back and forth. And my kids were playing in the next room, or so I thought. And I look out the window, and Matthias is out there on the street. And I bolt out the house, and I run after him. 7 months pregnant with Abigail at this time. He sees Mom chasing after him, thinks it's a game, has a huge smile on his face, and starts running farther down the street. And I'm running, trying to keep my maternity pants up, leaving my other toddler unattended, crying a prayer that my child will not get hit by a car before I get to him. The very next day, I have everything locked because of what happened. And lo and behold, I see Matthias in the front of the house. Luckily, he wasn't on the street. He was in the front of the house, but I run out there and I grab him. And I'm looking at the house because I'm so confused. Garage is locked, doors locked, side gate is locked because of what happened yesterday. And then I look at the porch, and he had popped out the screen of the window and climbed out of the house. Oh, all these white hairs because of him. So we thought, preschool would help, but he just never got past the transition hump like most kids do. It's normal for them to be nervous at first, but then they settle in, but he just never settled. He didn't follow along like the other kids did, and even at that age, he did things where the other kids thought was kind of weird. His teachers are having a hard time with him, and look, as mama, I was in denial. I was in denial that there was something off. Even now, I'm very conscious not to use the word wrong. I was in denial that there was something off. And I just kept saying, he's a late bloomer. He's on his own pace. Every kid is different. He's healthy. But the director of the preschool suggested that we get a speech assessment for him. And I didn't know, but you can do that through the school district. See, I only thought that you had to do something like that through the hospital. And I didn't want to go through a hospital because that would, my stigma, right? I didn't want to do the hospital. But school district, okay. Speech, okay, I could live with that. So we signed him up to get an assessment for speech. And what I didn't know at the time is once they assess your child for one thing, they assess your child for everything. So this team comes in. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. And we'll get some help with his speech. I could live with that. I could accept that. And it was a long process. We had school psychologists come in, speech therapists come in, behavior specialists, teachers. They interviewed me. They observed him. They observed him with me. They observed him without me. And after months and months of assessments and evaluations, we get the clinical report that officially diagnosed him with autism spectrum disorder. And I remember the exact moment when I received that call. I was picking up Jedediah from school. I was walking through the parking lot. And I was walking up the stairs when I heard those words, and each step got blurrier and blurrier as my eyes filled with tears that I just quickly had to swallow back for Jedediah's sake. Every special needs parent knows where they were in that exact moment when they heard the diagnosis. We call it D-Day, Diagnosis Day. And then we met what would become his team. When you have a child with special needs, there's not just one teacher they're assigned to. They're assigned to a whole team of people who are there for various services that he now qualified for because of his diagnosis. And even then, I was in denial. There was the stigma of special education and the stereotypes. And I remember when I was a kid and the mean things that people said about people in special education. And I thought, he's not that severe. It's okay. He can go to regular school and just get extra help on the side. I was prideful. And then we visited the special needs class. And I just fell in love with all those little kids there. They all had different needs. And they were all, different in their own way. They were all smart, clearly. They just moved a little differently. They will build Lego towers just to take turns knocking them down. He would get in trouble for that at the other preschool, but for here, right, they acknowledge this is a sensory input that they need, and they encouraged it. And they had a team, an equestrian team, bring horses to the school once a month so they could do equestrian therapy, and my son got to ride a horse once a month. They had a whole sensory room where they could swing and tumble and bounce because they knew and they acknowledged that this kind of input is good to their whole well-being, and that's part of their education. They would go on walks around the block to practice saying hi to people, and it was adorable. And I knew that this was exactly where he needed to be. And in a short time, he became a different kid. He went from being in trouble all the time. He went from being anxious and dysregulated to being happy. To this day, it breaks my heart to see him happy. I know that sounds funny, but when I see him happy, it makes me realize that most of the time, he's not. That most of the time, he's dealing with some level of dysregulation or anxiety or something. I've heard an autistic adult explain it this way. It's like if you try to play a PlayStation game on an Xbox console. When the hardware and the software don't match, that's kind of what it's like to live with a disability in this world. So he went from being the weird kid, the kid who got in trouble, to someone who belonged, and he was happy, and he was allowed to be himself. I will never forget the day that he made his first friend. He asked for a peer by name for the first time in his life, Tony. I want to pause here and just give you a word of practical advice for, this is probably what I get asked the most as a special needs mom, is how can I help someone who just got a diagnosis? How can I help a friend who is going through this? And the best thing you can do, the best way that you can be a friend to someone in this time is to just listen. Let them get it all out because it has to come out. This is the time to be like Job's friends before they said anything. Just listen. Because you'll probably say something that's well-intentioned but more harmful and stupid. And your friend will remember your presence in that moment more than anything. My special needs friends, they are some of the best people on this earth. And I want to give you something that God told her. We don't talk every day, but there are those days where we'll call each other because we had one of those days, and the other one will understand, and I'm like ugly crying, snot dripping, everything, and she will say, just get it out, just get it out, just get it all out. And when she was pregnant with her child who had a disability, before she could even know that he had a disability, she heard clearly from God these words that she shared with me, that I share with you. Everything about this child is going to be harder, but it's going to be okay. If you want to say something to a friend going through this, say that. But don't say anything else. Just be there and listen and let them get it all out. And if you are going through it yourself, or maybe you went through it but never fully allowed yourself the permission, what I want to say to you is give yourself permission to grieve. Doesn't mean you're grieving your child. It doesn't mean that you love your child any less. I know you love that child more than life itself. You would do anything to love and protect that child, and you would, and you are a good parent. I know your child is perfect and beautiful. But there is a grief that comes with a diagnosis, and that is the grief of expectations. You had expectations of what kind of life your child would have. You had expectations of what kind of life you would have with your child. And those expectations, they come crumbling down when you get a diagnosis. The first day of school might look different. They might be in a special class. Graduation might be different. They might not walk the stage with everybody else. I don't know if marriage is in the future for my son. I don't know if he'll be able to have a job or live independently. And all of those things, grieve it. Allow yourself to go there. Allow yourself to feel it and truly grieve it, because that is the only way that you will truly be able to lay them down and then get back up for the life that is now ahead of you. As long as I'm still holding on to these expectations in my mind, I will never be able to truly celebrate who my son is and his every victory that's going to look different than everybody else. Did you guys know that my son, the first time he lied, we celebrated? Did you know that lying is a developmental milestone that happens in your brain because you're able to think creatively and know when to use language and emotion and manipulation? It's something that your brain develops into, and he could not lie for the longest time. He would tell on himself. He would do something bad and say, I pulled Abigail's hair. He said, Matthias, did you do this? Yes. Knowing he's going to get in trouble, he couldn't lie. When he tried to play hide and go seek, he couldn't hide. He'd say, you found me. It was really cute. But the other thing about disabilities is they don't disappear when you stop being cute. So the first day that he lied, my husband and I, we scolded him like good parents. And then we were like, yes, he got it, yeah. His victories look different. And they're no less significant. So, of course, these are the early days, and there's so much that we have learned since then. There's so much that I've grown in my understanding and my journey of understanding autism and special needs as a whole. There was a lot of stigma and bias that I admit and that I worked through. And as I mentioned, a lot of education and learning that I needed. And at the root of it, autism is just a different wiring of the brain. So my son literally experiences this world differently than I do. And that's not something that he should be faulted for. Sensory is a big part of autism. I want to give you some practical things. Okay, sensory is a big part of autism, and it's a spectrum. So not everyone who has autism is the same. Even with the sensory thing, there's a huge spectrum. Some people they seek the input, and some people avoid the input because it's not pleasant for their brain. Some people have vestibular problems, which are problems with the inner ear, which is where your sense of balance comes from in your brain. And so some kids will spin and spin and spin because the center of their vestibular, whatever you call it, is different than ours. Some of them are, you've probably seen, maybe they flap their hands or maybe they bounce around or whatever they're doing. These things are called stimming. And what it is, it's an outward coping mechanism for an internal dysregulation, whatever that is. So if they feel off, they will do these stims to ground themselves. And really, if you think about it, this isn't harming anyone, right? Or they will do it because it feels good, because they don't have the same sensory input as you and I. So for you and I to feel something like this, they have to feel it like this. And Matthias will not stay still, like I told you, but because his input reactors are different from ours. Some people stim verbally. You'll hear people who recite things or just chant things, they're stimming. They're working out outwardly something that's happening in their brain. Some people, their senses are so heightened that things become painful or intolerant for them. So if you say, oh, you're not eating because you're not hungry, well, that's not always true. Sometimes my food aversions is because my brain cannot handle this, and that should be acknowledged. And there's also a tender side of that. My Matthias, he feels things so intensely that he can get overwhelmed, but also he'll sometimes just nuzzle my face with the tip of his nose, and just start fixating on my eyebrow and just nuzzle. And I know what he's doing. He's seeking that sensory, and it calms him. He can't do a t-shirt with a tag on it. He can't do pants even. It's got to be shorts. There are some sensory things that are going on. My point is that there are explanations for behaviors. The harmful thing to do is to try to control and conform behaviors without understanding what is causing the behavior, which is what the majority of therapies out there offer. But trying to change someone without understanding why they're doing it, special needs or not, is not right or fair to that individual. My job as his mom was never to change who he was. He is who God created him to be. But when we changed the environment, something shifted. He went from being always anxious to thriving. And it was and still is my job to find and create and fight for and lead him to environments where he can thrive and he can be himself. We deal with this now too. He's not a cute little preschooler anymore. He started middle school this year. Puberty is a whole nother, oh gosh. School has been up and down this year. Middle school's hard enough, right? Honestly, this year's been horrible for him. He was bullied on the second day of school. He's always getting into trouble. He's losing hair. He's stressing out. And again, when you don't have the language, right? Man, it's been so hard. And I don't know if he'll ever thrive in the institution that school is right now, because that's just not how he's wired. But all sixth graders get to go on outdoor school. That's a week away at camp in the redwoods. You're digging in the creeks, you're going to the beach, and guess what? That's exactly what's up his alley. He could be in the ocean all day. He loves nature. Matthias, I bet he knows more about animals and natures than any of us in this room. And I really wanted him to go. He really wanted him to go. And we were scared out of our minds. And even his teachers were like, I don't know if he'll be able to stay with the rest of the group. And I had to fight for him. And I said, look, it's not our job to stop him from going. If he wants to go, it's our job to make it safe for him to be there. So he went. A week away from home, you guys. Oh my God, Carlos and I prayed like we had never prayed before. And he wasn't even going to be with his special ed teacher. He was going to be with regular teachers, with a paraprofessional helping him out. We split up our work weeks. I took half of the week off, and I got a hotel down there, just in case, while he was up here with the rest of our kids. And then we switched off, and then he came down, stayed at the hotel, just in case, while the other one took care of the rest of our kids. Would you believe me if I told you all of the teachers there said that he was the best behaved one all week? I mean, I was even shocked. I'm like, really, my kid? And I worked for the school, so anytime I got a report about a kid doing something, is it my kid? I'm like, no, your kid's great. What happened is that when he was in an environment that nurtured who he was created to be, he thrived. And it's not just his teachers that had to see this. He needed to be able to see this for himself. He needed to see what he was capable of. He needed to see, I can do great things. That I am not the problem. Nick Vujicic, he's another Christian speaker who's disabled. He was born without limbs, no arms, no legs. Leads a ministry these days called Life Without Limbs. Speaks all over the world, inspiring people, encouraging people in the love of Christ. He had parents who loved God. And he had parents who never limited his experiences. They took him swimming. They told him to go to school, and they fought for him to be there. And in his own journey in coming to terms with a disability, he came upon the story in John chapter 9, where Jesus heals a man born blind. And those standing around ask him, Lord, who sinned? This man or his parents, that he was born blind? And Jesus replies, neither. But this has been done, that the works of God may be displayed in him. And hearing Jesus say those words changed the trajectory of his life. When it became truth that there was nothing wrong about who he was, but that there was glory of God to be revealed through him, this is what gave value to his life and his disability. See, special needs ministry is not about us who are better than you, taking pity on these poor, unfortunate souls. No, that's what the Pharisees were doing in Luke chapter 14. In this passage, this starts out, the Pharisees are declaring, blessed is everyone who eats the bread in the kingdom of heaven. What were they talking about? They were talking about this messianic prophecy that's found in Isaiah 25, chapter 6. This foretells of the inauguration of the Messiah, and it says, on this mountain, the Lord of hosts will make for all people a feast of rich foods, a feast of well-aged wine, of rich foods, of marrow, of aged wine, well refined. The Pharisees were declaring themselves to say, look at us, we're the ones who's going to make it there. We're the ones who are going to make it to this ultimate feast. And while the Pharisees are waving all this pomp and circumstance at themselves, this is when Jesus drops the mic, or the parable, so to speak, and he calls out their hypocrisy, and he says, you actually don't get it. Because if you knew what this life was actually about, if you knew what this call is about, if you knew who I am, it's not about how good you feel about yourself. It is about how well you seek and serve others. See, there's this duality between the outward appearance and the heart. The Pharisees looked great on the outside. They were the leaders. They were the ones who followed all the rules, but Jesus knew inwardly they were not about the things of God. And I love this. While he's sitting at the Pharisees' house, eating the Pharisees' food, he's like, you want to talk about that feast? The one in heaven? Guess what? I'm the master of that banquet. And here's what it really means. And in this parable, the master of the banquet, he throws out the invitation to everyone who was originally invited, and they all make excuses as to why they can't come. There's business to attend to. There's pleasure to attend to. And everyone who was originally invited chooses these excuses as the better thing. The Pharisees were the religious leaders. They're the ones who looked holy. They followed all the rules. But Jesus is saying, you have chosen your status. You have chosen your outward appearance as the better thing, but you are not actually accepting the invitation to sit at my table. You are rejecting what it means to sit at my table. The Pharisees were under the impression that the kingdom of God was about their gain, that they were the better offs, that they were the ones who were going to make it. It was the better offs versus the less thans. How do they pray? Oh, thank you, God, that I'm not like them. But God's heart is to fill his house. In verse 21, the master of the servant came angry. He became angry. And he said to his servant, go out quickly to the streets and the lanes of the city and bring in the poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame. And the servant said, sir, what you have commanded has been done, and there is still room. And the master said to the servant, go out to the highways and hedges and compel people to come in, that my house may be full. There are two different kinds of people in this parable. Those who don't want to come because they are making excuses that they have better places to be. And then there are those people who need to be compelled to come in. Now, these people are not have to be compelled to come in because they're making excuses. Why do they need to be compelled to come in? It says, go to the highways and the hedges and compel people to come in, that my house may be full. He is saying, go to those who are literally outsiders. Go to those who are marginalized and compel them. Why? Not because they don't want to come, but because they're not used to receiving an invitation. They have been told time and time again that they don't belong. They are used to being unwelcome. They are used to being not counted in the company. Jesus says, go and compel them to come in. Go and let them know that they are wanted. Let them know that they are invited. Let them know that I have prepared a feast for them. Tell them to come. Compel them to come and taste and see. Tell them that I am after them. It doesn't matter if they don't have the right clothing. It doesn't matter if they look different from the original guest list. It doesn't matter that they might be different. The master of the banquet is seeking them. Compel them to come. Fill my house. We're not doing this to feel better about ourselves. We are not doing this because Pastor Sharon has a child with special needs. We are doing this because there is a mandate from the good Father, from the master of the ultimate banquet, who has prepared a feast, and he longs for his house to be filled. Special needs ministry is acknowledging you are fearfully and wonderfully made in the image of God. You have the glory of God in you, and I want to provide an environment where that glory is revealed. How can I walk with you to reveal that glory? It's about finding people and telling them that the banquet master wants them. So let's compel the caregivers to come. Let's tell them that they are more than their responsibilities. Compel them to dream again, to rediscover who they are outside of caring for their loved ones' needs. Compel them to pursue their passions again. Compel them with visibility. Elroy, I see you. Compel them with respite. Respite just means rest and care. Respite is one of the most beautiful and powerful ministries that we could do. At least while you're here, let me take care of them so you can go and worship. At least while you're here, let us take care of you. Whatever it takes, whatever specialities we need to learn to do the job, we'll do it so you can come. Compel the differently abled to come. So what if they worship differently? It's all worship to God. So what if they're different from you? We need to see that because there is glory, the glory of God himself to be revealed if we will just obey the command to compel them to come to the Father's table. My son has taught me more about being a child of God and a disciple of Christ than any book I've ever read, any sermon I have ever heard. He has molded me into the image of God more than I ever would have been without him. Compel the families to come. As you heard, disability ministry is about the family. Disability ministry is unique because it's one ministry where you serve the whole family. If Joseph can't make it one day, he's one person. The rest of the team's going to go on without him. We'll miss his pretty playing, but it's one person. If disability ministries can bring one person to church, the whole family gets to come and worship. There are countless of families right now who want to come. The statistic is 90% of families who are affected by disability and who want to come to church, they don't because they don't know if there's a place for them. 90%, the harvest is already there. We just need to compel them to come. There's a place for you here. When Carlos and I came to ALCF, this beautiful disability ministry that was in place said, we'll take care of Matthias. And we were so scared. We were like, really? And we had our phones out the whole time, like checking it every minute, like any minute they're going to come and tell us to come and get him. But they never did. And it was the first time in our son's life, 5 years. It was the first time in 5 years that Carlos and I were able to worship in the sanctuary together. We call those the golden years, the honeymoon phase. For 6 months, we sat in the front row, and we just drank, and we healed, and we cried. How many more families out there are like that? How many more families are there just waiting for an invitation? How many more families are thirsty, in need of refreshing, in need of living water, desperate for a lifeline, living on the outskirts because they've never received an invitation? Compel them to come. You heard the statistic today. Did you know that the national divorce rate is actually going down? We said 50% for the longest time. It's actually going down, about 40%. But marriages with a disabled child, the divorce rate is 87%. That is extraordinarily high. And it's not because they don't love each other. It's because the stress and the pain and how hard it is and the lack of support that there is to raise their child is so heavy. So, church, I want to resolve a few things today with you. If we're going to do this, we need to resolve it's okay to look different. That banquet table, it looked a whole lot different from the original guest list. As a church, can we resolve that it's okay to look different? And by the way, we can take a cue from this as well. Give yourself permission to worship freely. You know, who says we got to stand in one place? Who says we got to clap just like this? If you feel compelled to get on your knees and worship God, then do that. Give yourself permission to look different. It's all worship to God. Our table's going to look different. Our sanctuary is going to look different. Our classes is going to look different. Can we resolve that it's okay to look different? And then secondly, can we resolve to welcome people? One of the most powerful things that someone said to me, and it was at a church that we were visiting at one time, and we're standing for worship, and Matthias, like I said, never still, and I'm trying to hold him, trying to keep him stationary as much as I can, and he's climbing over me, and he's climbing under me, he's climbing under the pews, he's go over here, he's over there. Special needs families are used to being judged. We are used to being stared at. We are used to being scrutinized. We are used to always constantly being stressed. And while I'm trying to constrain my son, I am trying not to make eye contact with anybody because I just know what they're thinking. Well, this woman, she taps me on the shoulder, and then I turn around. Doesn't know me, never met her in my life. She says, I just want you to know you are welcome here. It disarmed me. To this day, it is one of the most powerful things that anyone has ever said to me. I will never forget it because she meant it. You know, we hear about disability ministry and the work, and we think it's so daunting and intimidating and hard. Just welcome them. That is a huge part of it. That is more than half of the battle right there. So let's resolve to welcome. Say, you are welcome here. Whatever your circumstance, you are welcome here. And I want to resolve as a congregation that we will do the work. We will do the work. I'm not promising that it's going to be easy, but I do bet you it's a lot easier than you're thinking. A welcome word. Just being a buddy. We're going to resolve to do the work. Yeah, it might be hard, but it's going to be worth it. Why? Because we're obeying this command to fill our Father's house. Can we do those three things, church? And the work, again, we're reviving it today. It's been here before. We're starting it up again. We have a training upstairs that our good friends, Johnny and friends, are going to lead us through. This ministry is so incredible, you guys. They are here not just today. They're here to hold our hands until our ministry is up and running, as long as we need. I'm so thankful for them. They're going to train us today. And if you haven't signed up, it's okay. Just come. I ordered extra food. Please come. As we speak, our youth are hearing from Johnny and friends right now about how they can serve as short-term missionaries at this family camp over the summer in Mount Hermon, where they can serve as a buddy to a special needs camper while their families get rest, while their families get care. Our church will sponsor them to do this so they can learn to love people who are different from them and do that for kingdom work. We will create opportunities to put the work in to learn and train. For those of you who want to. Let's resolve to do the work, to educate ourselves together. And again, I know it can sound hard, but really it's not. And really to start, it's not. Matthias moved from our kids ministry to the middle school, to the youth group this year. It's cute. He always asks, is it Family Sunday or is there a youth club today? He likes going to youth club. Well, when he first moved to youth club, you know, they don't wiggle around as much as our elementary kids do. And, you know, the leaders in so much love are asking us, you know, how can we love Matthias? How can we help him? And so what we did is we made a sensory bag for him. We had a bag with all these different fidgets in it with like some slime and stuff and different things that I know he likes, some tactile things, a wobble cushion to give him like flexible seating. And I checked in with the youth leaders after that, and they're like, oh, much better. And then one of them says to me, that's all it took? That's all it takes. The hardest part is saying yes in your heart. The hardest part is this resolve and this obedience to the command from our banquet master to obey and to go and put the invitation out. It is important work, and it's not too hard for us. And I believe we are already equipped. You live in the Bay Area. You know how hard it is to work here, to live here? If you are making it here, you are a highly equipped, capable person. We can do this, you guys. And what would it look like if ALCF could be that place, could be that environment where individuals and families are changed because they are welcomed and loved and celebrated. See, I believe when we do this and when we seek this, when we compel those to come, we are going to see the glory of God revealed. I'm hungry for that. Aren't you? Will you join me on that journey today?